Hi, I'm Sustance and we're here in my studio in London, and today I'm going to be taking you through how I make drums in my drum and bass tunes, from sampling old funk breaks and layering them together. I hope it's something you find informative. Big up. So, here we are in live. I will give you a quick spin from the top of what we're going to be making. This is the vibe I'm talking about. Cool. So, minimal, tribal, rolling sort of drum and bass tune. The breaks, the whole drums, all of that comes from free funk tunes. There's no layered samples or anything like that in there, no synthesized samples. So we've got 3 breaks. We've got Afrique, House of the Rising Funk, which is this. That's where our bongos come from, or congas. Always personally choose a break when I'm sifting through breaks and I want to make something like this that's got a lot of interesting percussion in it. I wasn't really feeling the kicks or snares in that tune, which is why I chose a couple of other breaks as well. So the second one was Alan Toussaint, Get Out of My Life Woman, which is a classic breakbeat. Been rinsed in a million hip hop tunes, but it's because it's dope. Get out my life, woman. Big tune. So thought the kick was cool in that. And lastly, Bernard Purdie tune. Bernard Purdie, obviously one of the best drummers of all time. Amazing swing, amazing ghost notes. I really like the snare in this break. I mean, those hats as well, they're just crazy cool. Loads of shuffle. So yeah, those 3 breaks, and with enough processing. So let's get into it. Afrique, the bongo one. So what I do, I'm going to try and not go on for too long with this tutorial, but it is quite in depth what you have to do, what I do. This has been a lot of experimentation for me. I come from a sort of hip hop background, making things on an MPC sampler, chopping up breaks. So I've spent years like slicing up breaks and pitching them and affecting them differently. Obviously in Ableton you can do everything faster and more advanced. So to start with, I've got my break. Double click on it. In Ableton, hit warp, beats. Basically, I'll select every single transient, kick, hat, snare, bongo hits. Double click, and it allows you to create a transient marker or a node. Yeah, that's there. So that one will be a little ghost snare, hat, another hat, snare. Go all the way along, do every single one. Zoom right in, double click, zoom out. Don't be lazy, don't just try and guesstimate. You can change it later on if you want, but I just find, spend time chopping breaks. This is one of the things I find most fun about making beats, is chopping up break beats, funk break beats. It's the fun shit. Once you've done that, I right click and slice to new MIDI track. You can leave a slicing preset on built-in if you want. It'll chop it to a drum rack in Ableton with samplers on, I think, or simplers. You can create your own if you want, and that's what I've done. So I click on break chops. What break chops does is mimic an MPC. Well, I set up a preset to mimic an MPC. There's a really concise YouTube tutorial on how to do it. It's super easy. But basically, all it does is, these are all my samples. This is what it's done. And kick. Yeah, you get the vibe. It maps every single hit out on your from the breakbeat to its own slice on a sampler. Depending on how accurate you are when you hit your warp markers when you're doing this, is how accurate the sampler will have picked up the transients. So if you take your time doing this, you'll have, you know, the warp marker at the very beginning and the very end of the sample. You can, or if you've not done it, you know, super tight, or if the algorithm's made a mistake, you can just edit everything here anyway. One of the other things that I've done in this preset is put a multi-band compressor on, and all this is done is set up to, God, I don't even know if it's actually doing anything, these ones. I think it's basically designed to roll off a bit of the tops, or maybe I've just rolled it off on the EQ. Basically, it's to try and, when you're chopping up breaks, there's a lot of background noise been recorded by the engineers back in the day. When they record them, you get a lot of overhead cymbals and room noise, which sounds sick. But if you're making really fast, really clinical drum and bass, too much noise can become muddy and messy. And if you're in a club, you know, some tunes sound wicked if you're like listening to them on headphones, but if I'm in a club, I don't want to hear loads of splashy cymbal noise and break beats, because it just sounds horrible on most systems. So I have a multi-band dynamic set up to kind of trim in the tops, an EQ to roll off a little bit of the tops, but the most important thing is in the pitch oscillator section on the pitch envelope, where the transpose is, which basically the pitch of the sample, I've set a macro up. So you just right click, set to macro, and then basically this allows me to change the pitch of the samples, which I find is important in drum and bass, because, you know, you want to have things tight, you know, and you know, just you get more energy if you pitch things up. So basically this is what it sounded like. Exactly the same pattern. It's going to play now. Yeah, it's just rolled off the top end. It's just basically taken off the splashy noise. Now if I change the pitch, yeah, and the way you do that, change the pitch, you literally, once you set it to here, you have to do it on every individual hit. Change it, change it, change it, and then you just save here, and then it will save it in drum racks. Yeah, okay, I didn't actually need to do that, but hey ho. Cool. So you've got your break playing in MIDI now, which is what this is here. The next stage I'll set it to drum and bass tempo, whatever you want. This one's 172 because it's actually a remix that I'm doing at the moment. I think I started this in a remix project because I wanted to use these drums for another tune. So I've made it this many bars long, opened it up, and basically these are all the slices. So you can hear already that I've pitched this up. I'll pitch it back down quickly so you can hear. So it's up 3 semitones, yeah. So we've got, yeah, and I've decided to make, I've just spent, this is where like I've spent most amount of time, is getting an interesting pattern, or a pattern that I think sounds interesting. Yeah, that's just like playing around. Yeah, use some of the bongos, some of the ghost snares, just made a nice shuffly pattern, and then I pitched it up 3 semitones. You know what I mean? Makes sense? So we've got a nice shuffle there. And after I've done that, I've bounced it to audio. So I'll go into my sampler, I will select, or first of all, I'll double click on this. I'll be like, I use sample slice 28, 27, 25, 24, 22, etc. So the first one was 28. I'll go slice 28, solo it, set up a new audio channel, resample, and record that sound in. And basically, it's just converting it to MIDI. I mean, I'm sure you guys know how to convert a MIDI, bounce a MIDI pattern into audio. So it's gone from this to this is all these playing, so I could just I do that just so I can see visually whether any of the hits are like landing in different places because of any discrepancies in my sampling. And also it's interesting because you can, mute, get different patterns by muting different things later on in the tune. So the first 16 might be everything, the second 16 might be, have a different slice muted or whatever. Once I've done that, I chop out all the audio, all of the silence. I used to use Logic, and it had a function where you could just right click strip silence and you would just be left with this. Ableton doesn't seem to have that feature, so you have to do it manually. So all I do is just find the sample, delete, next bit, delete, next bit, delete. Same on this, you get the idea. Just remove all your silence, and then you've got even more control over what you're doing with the sample. So once I've got that, this is what I'm left with. You can hear it sounds a bit louder and more crispy. It's because on the group, if I select all of those and then hit Command G, it groups them all together. And then I've just put some processing, rolled off the bottom end, just because, you don't want to have too much sort of unwanted low frequency, and especially as I pitched it up, this is like a high mid sort of shuffle. I've put a compressor on. This is sidechain ducking out where the snare is going to go. This is just to make room in the mix. So up in all my projects, I have a sidechains, sort of a ghost sidechains section, kick and a snare. The snare, neither of them have got any audio coming out of them. They're just controls. I just put one where I want the kicks to go and one where I want the snare to go. The kick one is a much shorter transient than the snare. Basically, this is just so when the kick hits, the kick sample might have quite a lot of low frequency energy a little bit later on in its sound, and that if you have a whole kick sample muting out, that like you lose too much of your bass, because basically the kick is going to be sidechained to the bass line. So because I want to hear as much bass as possible, I just do a really short transient kick. With the snare, I leave it the same length as the snare normally. Sometimes I'll change it, but so I have that set up there. So on this group, this shuffle group, this is just going to snare sidechain there, and then basically that is just ducking out, as you can see here. That's just hitting where the snare would hit. The next thing, which is giving it loads of character, is this Late Digital mix rack. This is just emulation of hardware gear, distressor, compressor. I think this is supposed to be a Neve EQ. I mean, I'm sure you can use any Waves plugins or any other plugins to get the same effects. These look really nice. I mean, yeah. If I mute it out, you'll hear it's given me loads of volume because I've obviously boosted a lot on it. It's a bit of compression. This revival thing is got shimmer and thickness on it. I'm not, I think basically it just like adds sort of adding like top end. But it seems to sound nice. It's hard to tell really whether it sounds better than anything else. You have to pay a monthly subscription for this. It's like 15 quid a month. I've been doing it for a long time now. I feel like I've, spent a lot of money on it, so I'm kind of invested in it. Like I say, I think it's good. I've used a Neve 51 series console, like hardware desk before a couple of times, and the EQs on that were just the nicest EQs I've ever heard. And because of that, I always use this EQ. The tops are nice. They sound kind of sweet. It's cool. I like it. Anyway, so then I've just rolled off a bit of the tops there. And I think there was like an annoying harmonic frequency coming through here. And then camel fat, clear preset, and then I've just added a bit of tube, quite a lot of tube actually, but just adds a bit of that. I think, with breakbeats, with drum and bass particularly, especially if you're making minimal shit, you want it to sound a bit crunchy. So camel fat's wicked for that. And then the one thing with camel fat though, it does add in low frequencies back into the signal chain. So at the end, I think I've just rolled off. You can see this, this super low frequency noise is actually coming from this virtual mix rack. It adds, a noise floor back in. So I've just rolled off the bottoms to keep it clean. So yeah, we've started with chopped it up, pitched it up, cleaned it up, and then we've got this. I could do this all day, man. I love chopping up breaks. It's like, it's my most fun part of making beats. I absolutely love it. So that's a shuffle. Get Out My Life Woman. I think I just used a kick on this one. It had a lot of nice character to it. So the beat itself, I did the same thing again. Double click, warp, beats, zoom in, every single transient, add a warp marker. Once you've done that, right click on the audio, slice to new MIDI track. It comes in at this. Like I said before, I've got my preset set up so you'll hear the tops are just rolled off. It's a bit cleaner, Yeah, just playing them individually, and you can see where it's actually the samples are, to keep the feel that everything's not bang on quantized, which is what gives you swing when you're chopping up breaks, is why you use breaks. Obviously this one I've only used the kick, so it's kind of irrelevant. This is what the kick sounded like. I think I've just boosted some of the EQ. Oh no, I used an envelope shaper. So isotope alloy transient shaper, just whacked up the bottom end, whacked up the mids, whacked up the tops, and then taken down all the noise in the background. You can hear there's like sort of room hiss when it's up. Just taking it out. Maybe that's a bit too much. And then I've bounced it to audio like I did before. Just soloed the hit in the sampler, which was just this kick, I think it was one of these, number 7. Bounce that into this one here, and then just chopped out the noise. And I think what I did with this one, I just actually took out some of the room noise. Okay, so you can hear that sounds quite beefy and punchy and different. And the reason that is because I'll mute these quickly and you can hear. Oh, I didn't mute that. So the main hit is coming around here. Because I wanted to make this tune in E, I've just hit E down here, 41 Hertz, boosted it there, rolled off some of the tops. And then alloy, I've shaped it again. I've added more mid-range punch and a bit of top snappiness, and I've killed the bottom end here. This is a plugin that Ableton has with it. I don't always use it because sometimes if I'm making a synthesized kick I might want to layer that instead, but because I'm making the tune in E, I've put this boom in E plugin on here. I mean, you can hear straight away it's got a lot more girth to the bottom end. This boom section here, if I whack it up, yeah, you can hear what it's doing. It's basically taking this 41 hertz and like extending it to make it sound like an 808, which like that sounds cool, but obviously not in the sort of tune I'm making. But it gives you a harmonic in the bottom end to play with, so it's almost like you're tuning your kick. The top end is just like a sort of, you know, a sound, a snappy untonal sound. But if you roll that back a bit, you get a bit of bottom end weight. You can hit up the drive, you know, give it a bit more punch. And then it's got this section transients, which basically if you higher is more snappy, lower, you know, it's just an envelope shaper. And then lastly, I think I've just rolled off some tops. I quite often find myself doing this. I'll like add in transients to make it snappier, and then I'll roll them off. I don't know whether that's pointless, but it's just something that seems to happen. So that sounds a bit too much. Yeah. So that's all I use in this break. I mean, you know, whatever. There's loads of good stuff in it, but I just wanted to do a kick. So yeah, that sounded cool. So we've got our bongos, we've got our kick, and then lastly a snare and some hi-hats I've taken from Bernard Purdie. Super snappy snare, really well engineered, really shuffly, dope hi-hats. Done exactly the same process. Double click, warp on, beats, zoom in, transients right at the start. Done that on all of the individual hits. Right click, slice to new MIDI track, and then I'm left with this. This is playing. And then I've first of all focused on the snare. So I've just chosen one of the snares that I like the sound of. This one here, so obviously you can hear what I've done here. It's pitched it up a lot. So what it was on before, yeah, and I've just pitched it up by 8 semitones to make it super snappy and toppy. I like sharp, minimal snares, you know, I think they sound wicked. So that rolled off the bottom end, and then I've done more envelope shaping, loads of top end, mid-range punch. You hear all that noise after the snare. Turn the sustain down. Gone-ish. Same on the tops. You can kind of hear that splashback sort of reverb. Turn it down. This is wicked. Use it for everything. It's like the best multi-band envelope shaper I've come across. It's been around for forever. Everyone uses it. It's wicked. And then I've bounced that to audio, stripped the silence, and then have I added anything else? More envelope shaping here, just a little bit more punch, a little bit more tops. So I think when I stripped the silence here, I really taken off, like, you know, there's all of the tail that's on here, and this just makes it even more minimal. You know, really clean, really tight, and that's just like, you know, Bernard Purdie is playing the snare in my tune. Wicked. I'm up for it. Lastly, that's the snare. Lastly is the hi-hats. So it's the same thing again. I've just duplicated it, and where the snare was, yeah, I've just taken slices that were hi-hats and made a new rhythmic pattern. I did that, I think, at the same time whilst listening to this one. Just experimenting, played around, making different rhythms. And then I bounced this to audio each individual hit sample again. So I went in slice 13, that one, went into the sampler, found slice 13 here, soloed it, recorded the sound into a new audio track. Once I've got that, these are the renders of it. Each one of these channels playing each individual hit, and then same as before, I just chopped it up. So I've taken all this out, all of the sort of background noise out, and a few of these I'd noticed they were not exactly in the right place, so I just tightened them up a little bit. Okay, so you can hear there, this is what it sounded like. I wanted these ones to be quite wide because I had this shuffle here, the Afrique break, in the center. I used a ping pong widener, and it just delays one side of the stereo image by 17 milliseconds to give it sort of faux wideness, which worked well with what's going on? Oh yeah, you can hear the Bernard Purdie hi-hats on the right and left quite wide, and then obviously the bongo section right in the middle. So yeah, and once I did that, I bounced them all to their own individual tracks. So we've got the kick, the snare, the shuffle with the bongos, and then the hi-hats. And there you've got a tribal rolling drum and bass tune, all from 3 breakbeats, no synthesized kicks or anything layered on top. Super organic, super funky, you know. And there you go, that's how I make my tunes. So yeah, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from this. Thanks for subscribing on my Patreon. It means a lot. I'm going to continue doing more sample packs and more videos. And yeah, if you've got any requests for tutorial videos you want me to make, drop me an email, drop me a message on Patreon. But yeah, big up